right, so I think we're going to get started with our second presentation. After discussing homework, I suppose there's no better topic next than trauma. So Chelsea Huggins is going to be speaking to us about promoting our resilient learners.
All right. So ironically, I teach 7th grade math at Pennachuck, so what happens trauma at the middle level. I started my teaching career in New Orleans, and I taught at an at-risk school, 99% free and reduced lunch. And trauma really became part of my life because my students came to my classroom with such adversities that that was probably some days the focus of my classroom, not so much the math. And moving to Nashua, the adversities weren't as dramatic, but they were still there. And over the years, I've seen kids coming in with more and more adversities. And our district, I know Pennachuck, hasn't really done anything to help us support those students suffering from different mental health issues or coming to us with different types of trauma. So basically, that's the big elephant in the room here, is that we need to start dealing with trauma if we want our kids to become successful. So my research, I was going to look at kids that had trauma and do some research on their history over the years, but things kind of changed. So we're now focusing on trauma-sensitive schools. I'll give you a minute to read that. This is what the ideal situation would be. So this isn't just best for trauma kids, it's best for all kids. And we really, as teachers, want to make sure that our schools and our classrooms really do cater to all of our learners. And this is a kind of a quote that really struck me. So keep using the word trauma. When we're dealing with kids with multiple adversities, we're really dealing with complex trauma. So simultaneous or sequential occurrences of child maltreatment that are chronic in the early childhood development phases of their lives. This makes the biggest impact in the student's ability to access education, and also it impacts students' health. So as teachers, I'm sure we've all taken a child home with us saying, what do we do about this kid? If we could just take him home, it would make the world a better place. But as teachers, we don't need to understand every kid's history and their story and their trauma. We just need to be aware that they are experiencing trauma and just be mindful of it as we are moving through our classrooms in our day-to-day. That this does impact their attendance, their behavior, and their curriculum, their coursework. So just being mindful is all we need to do. We don't need to do a deep dive into every kid's history, because that wouldn't be good for us. So what are ACEs? Those are adverse childhood experiences. I'll give you a minute and go through the list. Every time a student hits yes or says yes to one of those bullet points, that impacts or raises their ACEs score. So I'll give you a minute to go through. You can kind of take a mental note if you have any adverse childhood experiences either. So you can kind of see those are the heavy hitting ones. Once it hit natural disaster, those are not as frequently on the surveys that you hand out, but where I taught in New Orleans, natural disaster was one for me. And I also thought a lot of our kids experience homelessness. That's not always, and at the middle level, we're definitely having issues with victimization and bullying that can impact a kid. So that is the questions you would ask kids, yes or no, and that's kind of how we determine their ACEs score. So they do have a negative effect on all the above: attendance, behavior, and coursework. So I'm sure that struggling learner, those are all of their problems usually. So for my research, I was planning on giving out that survey, but in the state of New Hampshire, they changed the law about surveys, and I don't know any parent that's going to consent to having their child take that survey with all those types of questions. So in the short term, I was worried about the parents that said yes. I don't know, I'm not sure it would be a good overall snapshot of my students. So I kind of pulled back from that part of it. It's actually Senate Bill 43 that kind of prohibited making sure parents have written off consent on taking any survey. So if we were to, as a district, move forward with this, we would definitely need to find a way around this issue because we definitely need that information on kids, be able to track them through their history, and be able to provide supports and interventions, especially at the younger age, moving forward. So survey didn't happen. But here's the stats. This is kind of like a national average. So if 28% are suffering from physical abuse, if you have a classroom of 20 students, that's about 6 of them. 27 have substance abuse in the home, also about 6 of them. 13 with domestic violence, that's about 3 students. And 20% sexual abuse, that's 1 in 5 or 4 of your 20 students in your class. So this is a huge problem. A lot of the kids don't share all this, but it is happening, and it goes across not just socioeconomic ties. It doesn't go across just different types of ethnicities. It's everywhere. So that was kind of another thing. And I'm going to use the national data from one of the books that I read describing the correlation between the number of ACEs and the struggles with school. So you can see no known ACEs is at 1, and as they go up, the impact to each of those categories goes up. And the CDC did a great study about how ACEs affect people's long-term health through adulthood, and it's pretty amazing. So it's beyond genetics. It is what is going to determine your overall health as an adult. So what we can do as teachers, I really focused on what I could do in my classroom right now. So building strong relationships, we always hear that, and as teachers we want to make like special connections with every single kid and develop those relationships that are really going to save a kid. Like, you think about like, this is going to be like this kid, I'm going to do so much for them. That's not realistic, and that really kind of prevents us from doing a great job. So just providing a safe enough environment, and if it's healthy enough, that those relationships will happen. And the relationships can be different for different kids. Not every kid needs to have a strong connection with all of their teachers. We just need to be predictable and consistent. And then I'm going to let you read a quote. This is one when I was reading that really stopped me in my tracks and made me really think about what I was doing in my classroom. So just give you a second. So I kind of switched gears this year and just kind of kept that in mind. And I feel like I have met more of my students' needs. And I feel like more students just kind of have developed a relationship naturally versus like me trying to force it on them. So it's kind of interesting. Also, good research came out of Washington State. If you want research on this, Massachusetts and Washington are way ahead of everyone else. So 6 instructional principles that you can pretty much do in your classroom. This also comes with a full curriculum, so if you want to implement things as icebreakers or trying to get kids, if you're in middle school, we do a lot of team activities, incorporate these into team events. So first one, always empower, never disempower. In terms of classroom, discipline should be consistent, respectful, and non-threatening. I read the book Discipline with Dignity. It was kind of a different philosophy on discipline that I adhere to. So I like that one. They kind of switched the term unconditional love to, because kids, their parents love them even if they come from traumatic experiences, so love isn't always a good word for those kids. Unconditional positive regard, so just being empathetic and just being kind is all you have to do. Some days it's frustrating, but keeping that. It's also easy to make excuse for students or cut them some slack because of what they're going through, but we really shouldn't be doing that. We just need to be putting more supports in place to allow them to be successful. And I understand that there's only so many hours in a day, and also we have limited supports in the classroom, but just trying to keep those high expectations as much as we can will definitely help students become successful. And this is one that I thought was very interesting. Check assumptions. So when I deal with behavior with students, I'm always trying to find the why they're behaving that way so we can prevent it from happening in the future. And just sharing your observations with kids and then just questioning it has been very insightful in terms of what you get for responses. So an example that they gave in the book was just that, or actually this is my example, I changed it. So students always ask to go to the bathroom right when they're asked to do independent work. I teach math, so stopping the kid in the hallway, I'm like, I noticed that you asked to go to the bathroom, but every single time we start doing independent work, yeah, I struggle and I don't want to work with my group, I'm embarrassed. And then you can find the right answer, get them in class, and get them working. So just kind of making those observations and asking kids has been really empowering for them and for me. In middle school, if we have conflicts or issues, it's usually because of relationships. Maintaining and developing relationships is really hard for people who have the skills, let alone for people who don't have skills in that category. So, really kind of focusing on teaching kids how to get along and then allowing them to show their skills. So when they are able to teach someone else, they feel that they belong. They feel that they're included in the classroom setting, which is really impacting for them. And it, as a math teacher, helps me out too. So it's been interesting to see how that played out. So if you're on board, things you can do in your classroom, those 6 principles are really great. So know your ACE number. Some of you may have checked yes or no and kind of have an idea of what you are. The video is Resilience and Paper Tigers. I know resilience has been shown some places in the district, but it's a really great video that talks about the impact of ACEs over a person's lifetime. It's put out by this documentary, and it includes the CDC research. And then Paper Tigers is how that is actually applied in a high school. It's an alt school in Washington, and it's very interesting since that's where I started, was an alt school. So their data kind of drove how they do things a little differently. Why is this important? And I also attended a mental health first aid training recently, and it was really interesting to kind of figure out what to say and do in those critical moments for students. Kind of like how you provide CPR until the EMT gets there, you're kind of like that person until someone can take over. So it was a worthwhile training. And then from there we can build. I really loved, out of all the books that I did read for this, the Fostering Resilient Learners. The person who wrote it was a community counselor for education and school kind of outreach, and then a middle school principal wrote the book together. So it was a really good insight on getting kids in school and what they're doing. And then applying those 6 principles, and they broke them into 3 domains. It comes with a bunch of activities and it's free. So that was kind of stuff we're gonna try to implement on our team next year. And then no one from central office is here, but then at that level, they would need to make things happen beyond at the school and at the district-wide level. I know that a few of them are really really wanting for this type of thing to happen in the schools, but they would have to make it. So I'll leave you with one word. And when that kid's really grinding on your nerves, remember, have some grace. And then if you have questions. Any questions? Gary?
What would those next steps, what would you recommend the district do if they wanted to kind of move in this direction or teach some of these strategies?
I think we all need to get on board on what trauma is first. I know Elm Street showed the resilience video. I think that is a really good first step into this. And also that Paper Tigers video, it's a documentary, so it kind of shows like what things could be if we just changed. And also there's going to be a lot of PD. What I have found, it's not a lot of money that would be required for this. It's more what you do and what you say really kind of changes the whole environment of your classroom. So that would be a lot of coaching, I'm going to guess, for some people. And some people, it's just more intuitive. So it's a philosophy mindset thing. Any other questions? Yeah.
So just this Fostering Resilient Learners book, that's available, you said it was free?
No, that one isn't free. It's the other one, the 6 principles
Oh, okay.
that are free. The Fostering Resilient Learners, I actually checked mine out of the library, of our school library.
Okay.
So,
Maybe you could get that into the district reads, you know, on the corners, on the X2, they have all the district reads that they can get onto, so we've got things like Teaching with Poverty in mind, and there's a whole set of books that you can access.
oh,
That could be a way we could maybe have access to that.
it would be a good one to have access to.
If I glance at your paper, I'll find the.
My paper's not over there, but I will print one for you. Yeah, all the resources are in the end of that paper. Okay.
What platforms are the documentaries on?
One of them is kind of a nudge. It's you have to subscribe to it, and you have to get like a screening set up, and you have to pay for that one screening. You get one screening, and that's it.
Which one's that?
Resilience, which is like the step into it. Paper Tigers I watched on Amazon Prime and Netflix. Yeah, so one of them's super easy to get access to. The other one is you would want to get it and then have the whole school watch it, kind of thing. Diane?
Just a comment that
What?
I think about a lot. I think that as teachers ourselves, this applies to us, right? We all have our heritage and history, and I guess what I find myself thinking about is that if a teacher isn't feeling empowered, right, or in any way feels disempowered, it almost becomes like a crooked calculus. So I guess I champion the broadening of the sensitivity and awareness of trauma, you know, beyond classroom walls, you know, to the entire school, to the entire district.
And there was a lot of research in the book, The Fostering Resilient Learners, about what teachers' mental health and what teachers can do to stay at their best. So I didn't include that in this, but that is a whole nother piece to the secondary trauma and making sure that we are happy and whole so that we can be patient. So,
Your next year's job.
yeah, chapter 2. Any other questions? No? Okay.